Well, good morning to you all, and let me begin by thanking you for joining me here this morning. It gives me real pleasure for me to welcome you to the launch of our 2017-18 annual plan. We've been operational for 2 years now. We celebrate our birthday next week, and so I want to share with you our key aims and also a summary of the anticipated activities for the coming year. And just as crucially, today is an opportunity for you to provide your initial views of the PSR's forward work plan and to feed into the strategic issues we'll be focusing on over the coming 12 to 18 months. So our engagement with stakeholders through the means of bilateral meetings, roundtable discussions, consultations and annual surveys has been, as I hope you all know, a really crucial element in all of our endeavours to date, and we really do want to continue to build on that going forward. We take your views very seriously, and I hope that our commitment to consultation and transparency over the last few years has demonstrated to you what type of regulator we want to be. In fact, we recently asked many of you in this room how you think we're performing in our independent stakeholder perception survey. And we'll be reviewing the full findings of that survey and indeed feedback from today to make sure that we're continuing to engage with you in the way that works best. And we'll be talking to you about that further in coming weeks and months. So last year, you told us that as a new regulator, we'd started well, but you were also keen to see if we'd really follow through and do what we said we would do. So a year on, I'm pleased to say that the early feedback, at least from our survey, suggests that most of you do agree that we have followed through and delivered, and most of you agree that we have communicated with you throughout. And conducting that survey has been an insightful exercise for us, and we really look forward to continuing our open discussions with you on how we can do more of what we're doing well and how we can perhaps improve in areas where we need to do more. So, for example, in our conversations with you, you've told us that you want to see more of us face to face, and today is just part of that journey. So we have come in listening mode, and I encourage you to take time to reflect on what we've done in the last 2 years, what's worked well, perhaps what hasn't worked so well, and on where we go next. We'll be making sure that we follow up this event with more similar conversations throughout the country, and the first of those will take place later in the summer. But I wouldn't be doing my job properly if I didn't point out that as regulator, we clearly can't please everybody. And in fact, we wouldn't be doing what we're supposed to do if we even tried to do that. So our focus remains on meeting our statutory objectives, and they sit at the heart of everything that we do. And they to help us realise our vision, which is to make payment systems work well for the UK economy and for users, and to inspire confidence in the use of payment services. We recognise the importance of listening to all your views and taking on into consideration those along the way, and that's exactly what we intend to do today and going forward. So if we look at the journey so far, when the PSR was first set up, we held a series of discussions with you to help us understand the key concerns and the real issues, and therefore to decide where we could best focus our attention. And it was with that input that we determined how we should go about doing our job as the world's first payment systems regulator. In our first 2 years of operation, we've made significant progress in addressing those key issues we identified together. And we are delivering on our statutory objectives to promote competition, innovation, and ensure payment systems meet the needs of users. So what were those issues? Well, the first thing we heard was that that difficulties in getting access to payment systems were getting in the way of retail banking competition and indeed competition between payment service providers more widely. So that's why we focused heavily on opening up access. And I'm pleased to say it's now quicker, cheaper and easier to connect directly to the interbank payment systems. There's also more choice in the ways to connect. Now, earlier this month, we published our second report on access and governance of payment systems, which has documented the improvements in the provision of access in terms of choice, the time it takes to join, value, quality, and level of engagement with service users. And we've seen some groundbreaking access milestones in recent months as Raffles Bank, Metro Bank, Starling Bank, Clearbank and Monzo have become the first new joiners to faster payments since it was launched back in 2008. And we're expecting that rate of progress to continue. Indeed, we expect several new direct participants across the interbank payments systems throughout this year. We've also focused on improving indirect access, and indeed we carried out a market review into indirect access of payment systems to examine whether market conditions support effective competition. And again, we focused on choice, service quality, and the ability of indirect payment service providers to switch their indirect access provider. And we concluded that although competition in the supply of indirect access is producing some good outcomes, we do have some concerns around the quality of access, limited choice for some providers, and barriers to switching. However, we are seeing developments in that market, and those combined with our own work are likely to resolve a number of those issues without the need for further immediate regulatory intervention. And these include improved technical access options for indirect payment service providers, the entry of new indirect access providers into the market, the publication of an updated code of conduct which sets out indirect access providers' responsibilities, and of course the forum's final strategy, which includes provisions to simplify access to payment systems further. So progress on access is good, but there is still more to be done, and improving access further will remain a key focus for us in the coming year. In particular, we'll be pushing for the additional simplification of the entry process through the Payment Strategy Forum and its proposal to combine the 3 interbank schemes, and that should reduce the time and complexity in joining payment systems. We also want the operators to finish their work on developing access models and solutions that facilitate the development of aggregators, and we want that to happen by the end of this year. We expect them to be ready in time to progress applications from non-bank payment service providers in light of possible upcoming changes to the Bank of England's settlement account policy. We also want indirect access providers to revisit their voluntary code of conduct and consider how they can improve payment service providers' awareness of and confidence in it. We're expecting them to address outstanding quality-related issues that affect payment service providers, namely poor relationship management and the short notice periods for termination of indirect access arrangements. And of course, as part of our efforts to monitor the effectiveness of our own work, we'll be reviewing our directions later this year to make sure that they remain fit for purpose, taking into account the proposed consolidation of the operators, BACS, faster payments and check and credit, and the implementation of PSD2. So we plan to carry out a full consultation on any changes over the summer. Second, we heard real concerns about the fact that it's the established banks that own and control payment systems. So that's why we carried out a market review of the ownership and competitiveness of the infrastructure that supports the 3 main interbank payment systems. And we found that the current ownership setup does get in the way of competition and innovation. And we set out clear remedies to make the market work better. So in particular, we want to see the big banks divest their ownership of Vocalink. We want to see competitive procurement of the payments infrastructure going forward. And we want to move to open international standards. And we're in the process of ensuring that all of those things happen. Third, we heard that the industry was slow to innovate where collaboration is needed. So while there's lots of innovation at the consumer end, much less was happening behind the scenes and sort of plumbing and the pipes and wires. So that's why we set up the Payment Strategy Forum. And through the creation of the forum, we've generated momentum for industry-led collaborative innovation in payments, giving stakeholders the voice and opportunity to engage in the future of UK payment systems. And we remain committed to our belief that better outcomes are produced when the industry takes ownership and collective responsibility for its own strategy. So while the forum's work is industry-led, importantly, as a regulator, we do stand firmly behind it to ensure the appropriate pace and direction. And over the last year, we've really started to see the forum come into its own. I was really pleased to see the forum launch its final strategy for collaborative innovation at the end of last year. And that sets out in detail how the industry plans to simplify and modernise the UK payment system, and it certainly has the potential to be game-changing. And we've seen extensive involvement by the payments community at every stage in the strategy's development, and that really is a testament that this has been a truly collaborative endeavour. So the focus for the forum now turns to implementation of that strategy, and that work has already started. We're pleased to see the progress of the forum, but we're also determined to hold the industry's feet to the fire to develop and implement its proposals for a new payments architecture to an ambitious timeline. And that starts with the delivery of a new payments architecture blueprint and pilot in the summer. And as set out in its final strategy document, we expect the forum to consult on its work over the summer and to be prepared to hand over the design work to the new payment system operator by the end of this year. We also expect the forum to progress with the delivery of the solutions it identified to address end-user needs, so request to pay, confirmation of payee, and enhanced data. And these solutions were developed in response to feedback from you and the wider payments community. And they will give users greater control over automated payments, greater assurance that their payment will reach the intended recipient, and the ability to send additional information with a payment. So we have confidence that the forum will succeed in achieving its goals whilst maintaining security and resilience of the payment systems. But should it fail to do so, then obviously we will not hesitate to step in. So all three of those things, our work on access, ownership and collaborative innovation, are basically about driving better outcomes for payment systems users and ultimately consumers by driving competition and innovation into the system. And if you draw it all together, we should be moving towards a world where we have state-of-the-art payments functionality and control for consumers, driven by simplified open access, competition in infrastructure, and in overlay services. So we've come a long way over the last 2 years, and we will continue to work with the industry to deliver on the work that we've already started. But we will also be exploring 3 new areas with a view to understanding new industry trends and what our role, if any, should be in those areas. And all 3 of those new areas are driven by changing technology and changing consumer expectations, reflecting the fact that the pace of change is without doubt the greatest challenge that we face as a regulator and that the wider payments community faces. And all 3 areas have been identified in collaboration with our panel and industry. So the 3 themes are consumer protection and education, the increasing use and value of payments data, and changing competitive dynamics. And although we've identified those as 3 separate areas, we mustn't make a mistake of treating them as distinct, because the interconnectedness of these 3 areas is indisputable. New technologies, for example, give rise to a greater volume of new payments data, which in turn carries vast implications for consumer protection and education. Similarly, the evolution of technology and an increase in the number and diversity of participants in the payment space creates a potential for change in competitive dynamics in the market, which again may have implications for the consumer. So let me take just a moment to explain each of those 3 in more detail. So on consumer protection and education, the development of new ways to pay and the explosion of technology in payments are really exciting and without doubt a great sign of progress. But unless we manage that properly, it can also mean new opportunities for fraudsters and increased likelihood that some vulnerable users may get left behind. So to prepare for that, we'll be considering questions around future consumer protection, regulatory gaps, and consumer education around the benefits and risks associated with the use of new payments products and services. And that's just to name a few of the issues. The super complaint we received from the consumer group Which has already started to take us into this area, and we expect more consumer protection issues to emerge in the future. So our consumer research and the forum's initiative to deliver financial crime solutions will progress existing exploratory work in the area of payment systems fraud. We'll also be publishing our findings on the potential role of payment system operators in tackling authorised push payment scams, which will also help expand our knowledge of the scale of the problem. And we recognise that while payment systems and services need to meet the needs of an increasingly connected world, they should also make sure they're inclusive of all users. So the financial capability principles that were drawn up by the Forum are an important step towards future payment services that are designed to deliver with all the needs of all users, including the vulnerable and excluded, in mind. And those principles will contribute to wider efforts to improve the UK's financial capability. On the use of data in payments, we're scoping out the various issues that could arise as a result of the expected increase in the availability and commercial use of payments data. So, for example, greater availability and use of payments data due to PSD2 or open banking could potentially drive innovation in the sector. Now, that results in more payment products and services being made available to end users, which is great from a consumer perspective. We also need to look at how that influences competitive advantage, what it means for market structure, and therefore what it means for the nature of competition in the sector. An increased commercial use of payments data will also have implications for end users with respect to privacy, security, and data protection. And then thirdly, on changing competitive dynamics, we'll be monitoring the evolving market from a competition perspective and direct our focus and regulatory response to any emerging issues. So we'll be particularly exploring how the economics of the sector are changing, where competitive advantage is likely to come from, and what impact that may have on market structure. And our contactless mobile payments project is a great example of the type of work we might pursue under this theme. So the rapid growth in mobile payments in the UK could affect all three of our statutory objectives. So to ensure our understanding of the sector is up to date, we issued information requests to selected participants in the contactless mobile payments sector back in September. And we've now reviewed the responses and are considering how best to fill the remaining gaps in our knowledge. And we expect to be re-engaged with stakeholders in the coming months as part of that work. So to conclude, the payments landscape is a really exciting place to be at the moment, and we're pleased that our work to date is starting to pay off. The PSR was set up to regulate the payments industry in order to drive innovation and competition through a forward-looking, pioneering and evidence-based approach. And to reiterate what I said so far, in order to meet our objectives and wider goals, we'll continue our ongoing work and also explore the three new themes around consumer protection, education, data use in payments, and the changing competitive dynamics in the market. We'll be taking time to reflect and better understand what those three themes mean for the payments landscape and to determine what, if any, role we should play as a regulator. And it is this work that will provide us with the foundation for our future direction to 2020 and beyond. And I'm glad to be able to invite you to start this journey with us today. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what you've all got to say today and to working with you in the year ahead. Thank you.